So, conflict and problems. These are two very different things. We can have conflict around problems, but they're very different in terms of what we are trying to create and literally even the energy to which we will put toward it. So a problem really is any situation, can be a person, can be a relationship that requires us to have discussion, that requires attention, solution, and answer. And typically, the problems that we identify, and let's make no mistake, we have problems every single day, small, medium, and large. That the problems we identify, we tend to know they have a solution, and we will feel more and more frustrated if we can't find that solution, but we know that there's a solution. That there tends to be this, we approach problems, our relationship with problems tends to be in the mental realm. It tends to be at an intellectual level. So think about it like when you are doing crossword puzzles or Sudokus. Sure, you can get frustrated, you can feel challenged, but there's not this sort of underlying emotional escalation that lives there. And we know that there's an answer, we just can't figure it out. A conflict, on the other hand, right, is different than this. A conflict has an undercurrent to it, and it is an undercurrent that aligns with emotional escalation. My definition of conflict is when I believe my needs aren't going to be met because of another person. That those are those three components. A problem really is, it's impersonal, where a conflict is very personal. So one of the most common approaches, we know this from the research, that we tend to have towards conflict is in the category or bucket called inaction. And that is, we are not going to deal with the conflict. We're going to avoid it. We're going to deny it. We're going to ignore it. A lot of our cultures are conflict adverse. And I believe the reason that our cultures and most of us tend to be conflict adverse is because that it is that what is lurking underneath the surface that we know is there, but we are not comfortable, and nor do we feel confident at how that's going to feel or what the impacts are going to be if we start to address it. So we want to, the safer place, if you will, is to be able to address what we can see. That's problem solving energy tends to feel as simple as, oh, it's a problem to be solved. Where conflict energy, right, it feels a whole lot bigger than that. And it's because of the underbelly. Think about it like an iceberg. That top 20%, that's behaviors, and what is underneath that? Feelings and fears. And this is what drives conflict, is our feelings and our fears. And so guess what? That's also the place we need to solve the conflict, is at the feeling and the fear place. If we take, let's just say, a really simple conflict, and I see this all the time, right? That, there's a lot of conflict around when people come in late for meetings, for example, and that typically it's the same people who are always coming in late who are tardy. And that, if we treat that simply as a problem to be solved, then we will just move the meeting time to when it would be appropriate for an individual to get to the meeting. Or we just simply have that conversation. Hey, Bob, how come it is that you're always 15 minutes late for every single meeting? Let's talk about that. Isn't that interesting? Right? That's problem to be solved energy. We know though, right, that in these, even the simplest cases, that's not really what's going on. Sure, the behavior is tardiness and it coming in late, but why is it a conflict and not simply a problem to be solved? Because of how we feel about that behavior. And Right. And so that's where we need to be able to literally have the conversations, because that's the only place that's going to solve the conflict, is to be addressing those feelings and those fears. So what are they? And, as complicated and sophisticated as human beings are, the other reality is our needs and our feelings and our fears are very simplistic. There's lots of social scientists and psychologists, that have spent their life, devoted their life to being able to sort of categorize what are these feelings, what are the needs, what do we need to feel? And so my approach is as simple as this, that when we go underneath that iceberg, when we get into what is percolating underneath the surface driving the conflict, it always has to do with how we feel significant, competent, or worthy / likable. That's it. It's that simple and that difficult, right? So this is the level of conversation that we need to start having on a regular basis. How are you feeling significant today? How are you feeling important? How are you feeling noticed? How are you feeling competent? How are you feeling that you are in your element, in control? How are you feeling that you know what you're doing versus feeling like you're out on a limb and you don't know what you're doing? How are you feeling, that you belong here? How are you feeling that you are liked and are worthy and deserving, right? These are the questions. And, so often in our workplace, we see these human element needs as things that we shouldn't have to address. And this is to our undoing, because without being able to address those, we will then have conflict, and that conflict will continue to go unresolved, and it creates havoc. And I could go on about the research and the statistics, and the cost of unresolved conflict. It's huge, and it is literally costing billions of dollars, and our mental health is suffering. So the times of saying we don't have to address these human element needs is past. We do need to. And guess what? We don't have to develop huge systems and process and procedure and policy, right? I think that some of the way our organizations and cultures have approached these human element feelings and needs has been trying to, create all that structure and, as a way of making it feel safer. And really and truly, we don't have to be experts. We're human beings already. We already have our own feelings, right? Significance, competence, and worthiness. And the teams and the leaders that really are able to problem solve the best, stay out of that conflict, negative tension, energy the most, are the ones who are prepared to have the conversations, to elevate the conversation. So we're talking about, how are we feeling? How are we feeling significant, competent, and worthy? Because when we don't, the only thing that's going to happen is conflict will ensue. And the behaviors that we are going to hang our hats on as the reason why those conflicts exist will simply be misleading. The behaviors at that point then become symptomatic of what the underlying feelings and fears are. So that's the difference between a conflict and a problem. And so I really encourage you, don't wait until you feel you have no choice to address stuff. Get busy addressing it now. Become conflict proactive. Get into the dicey conversations about how you are feeling. This is what great leadership does, and this is how great teams exist in collaboration, so that we can all solve those problems that exist every single day. All right, if you would like to know more about how you can successfully, with confidence and competence, address the conflicts you have, please reach out to me. My website is patriciaz.ca, and I would love to have a conversation with you so that you can be having these conversations with your team. All right, I hope you stay healthy and I hope you stay sane.